Space, the final frontier. Actually, the final frontier is the human heart. So I'm so excited today to be joined by a real-life Catholic astronaut to dive into the heart of this man and his exploration of space, his life dreams, but above all, God. Thanks for being with us. I'm so honored to be joined by General Kevin Chilton. Thank you so much
Chris,
for being with me.
it's great to be here. It's really good.
It's seriously an honor. And I just touched one of the 500 people in human history who's been in space. Whoa!
More to follow. More to follow.
Yeah, it might become almost too common in the years ahead. General Chilton is a four-star general and an astronaut, a total underachiever. Must have really disappointed his parents in how he turned out, but no.
Surprised them, that's for sure.
I think you surprised yourself, I'm going to guess.
Sure.
Let's talk about your journey, your journey in your career, your journey in faith. Did you always want to be an astronaut like most kids?
Actually, no.
You did?
No, I didn't. In fact, I remember my parents waking my sister and I up to watch Alan Shepard go up in space, the first American to go in space.
Wow.
And we lived in California, and he launched at 6 in the morning in Florida, so it was a 3 o'clock get up. And I wasn't real enamored about getting up that early in the morning and sitting on the sofa and watching this little black and white TV, and the launch was delayed.
Wow.
And my parents made us get up to watch the first 3, and then they realized we weren't enjoying it. So it never crossed my mind that this would be something I could do.
That's amazing.
At that age. And so, no, I didn't grow up wanting to be an astronaut.
When I was about 8, I was convinced I would be the first monk astronaut. Neither of those things quite panned out for me.
But we're still waiting for that one.
but it's not. Life's not too bad. I'm enjoying getting to talk to you today.
Yeah.
Were you enamored with space in any way? Did you dream about UFOs and?
Yeah, no, it was hard not to be plugged into the Apollo program. So I grew up in the 60s, so I graduated from 8th grade in 68. So the next year, man walked on the moon for the first time.
Yeah, so you're thinking of this kind of thing.
I mean, you couldn't ignore it.
Yeah.
And it was exciting, for sure. You kind of tracked what was going on. But I remember, watching Neil Armstrong step on the moon live on live TV.
Yeah.
And so there were moments like that you never forget. But again, I just never felt like this was something that I could do, so I wasn't interested in it.
So when did the dream enter in?
It was an evolution. It really was. So what I was interested in was becoming a pilot.
Okay.
I wanted to fly, and so
it's thrilling.
I grew up in the shadows of LA Airport. In fact, my grammar school, visitation school, is if you take off from Los Angeles International Airport on the north runway and look out the right window, you'll see the bell tower. It's still there.
Wow.
The church and the school. And at the departure end of the runway, if you look down, you'll see my high school, St. Bernard High School. And so, we used to joke that we all learned how to read lips, because every 2 minutes a jet would go by and the teacher would keep talking, and you had to keep up in class. But I was just always fascinated by airplanes flying, and whether it was laying at the beach at the end of the runway, in high school and watching them go overhead or whatever, I thought that was something I would really like to do.
It really is amazing. And by the way, my wife grew up in Venice Beach.
Okay, so I was in Westchester, just
so
up the road, down the road.
Amazingly like you. I mean, that's not the kind of place where a lot of kids grow up and end up with very deep Catholic faith, especially in Venice Beach. But
but although when in the time period I was growing up in Los Angeles, there was every parish had a Catholic school. Okay. I mean, it was we were the baby boomers, right?
Yeah.
And my father was a World War II vet, and we had 4 children in our family. I had 3 siblings, and we were that was below average. Mm-hmm. There was so many kids, and the schools were packed. I can remember first grade, there was 1A and 1B.
Wow.
And, so 2 classes in first grade. And I think I have a Polaroid of my first grade class. And of course, we're all sitting there at attention in our uniforms. And I think there were between 50 and 60 students in that class. In 1A.
It's a different era, man.
And 1 nun.
Yeah, wow.
And we all learned to read.
Wow.
I mean, unbelievable.
Right?
It was a different time. But I would say the Catholic community in that part of Los Angeles, anyway, was really vibrant at
Praise
the time.
God.
Yeah.
Praise God. But no, I actually love hearing how you did not dream of being an astronaut. You dreamed of being a pilot. It's mysterious how God leads us on these paths through life to end up where we are.
Oh, yeah.
If people ask you, how do I become an astronaut? The answer is probably, I don't know how the heck I became an astronaut. I mean, what do you say when someone says, I want to be an astronaut? I'm sure little kids tell you that.
Oh, well, yeah. I explained to them that, NASA has certain criteria they're looking for, but it can change, And, one year they may value test pilots over engineers in the selection process. Another time they may value doctors or engineers. And so what I always emphasize to people is, you need to do your homework and see what NASA requires from a physical and educational background.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you should find what you're talented and what you're good at and pursue that. Because, the worst thing that could happen to you is, you do all the things that you think you're supposed to do to become an astronaut and you hate it. And then you get to the point where you're qualified and something terrible like Challenger happens and NASA doesn't hire a class for 3 years. And now you look in the rearview and go, well, that was terrible.
Yeah.
So better to make it a win-win situation. And that's what I try to emphasize. Be passionate about something beyond the goal of becoming an astronaut, because there's so much luck involved in it along the way.
Do what you're loving and what God places before you in that next moment.
Right.
That next moment.
Yeah.
Test pilot. That's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Well, no. I mean, it's not. It was crazy in the 1950s.
Okay.
I mean, that was when it was really dangerous. But it's much safer nowadays. But it's a different kind of flying, and it's where you get to take all the I studied engineering in school, and to be a test pilot, you have to have an engineering or physics degree or math degree, and you get a chance to apply it. Because you can be an English major or any other major, history major, and fly airplanes. But to be a test pilot, you get to combine that engineering knowledge with your flying skills, and that's what's fun about it.
It's funny it's funny how you say not that dangerous. I mean, you look like a really calm, composed guy, but you've done things that I would never ever come near.
Well, then that's
scary stuff, man.
You got to question my judgment.
So. You're the insurance salesman's nightmare. He's trying to close a deal, and
funny you should say that. Can I tell you a story about insurance? So I was I was still single. Kathy and I had not got married yet. We were dating though, and I had just moved to Houston and bought a house to join the class in the new astronaut class in 1987. And in those days, pre-internet and stuff, you would get, as soon as your phone number was in the phone book, you'd start getting cold calls from salesmen. And I get a cold call one day from a young man who's, he dives right into his life insurance pitch. And I'm listening politely, and I'm thinking, I'm about to propose to Kathy, and we're going to get married, we're going to start a family.
I should get insurance.
Yeah. So when he finishes his pitch, which, he takes one breath and talks for 2 minutes, I said, I actually would be, interested in hearing about life insurance. And I could tell I'd made his millennium. I'd made his millennium, when I said that. I can't imagine how many times he'd been hung up on. And he says, okay, and he goes through this long list, do you smoke, how's your health, At the end of the list, he says, so what's your occupation? I said, well, I'm an astronaut. Dead silence on the phone. He says, no, really? I said, well, yeah, I'm going to start training to be one here shortly. I just arrived.
That poor guy.
And he says, can I call you back tomorrow? And he calls me back the next day with that same excited voice, and he goes through this long pitch. And when he finishes, I said, let me see if I got this right. He says, the max you'll insure me for is $50,000. And if I die in an airplane or a spaceship, you don't pay out. And he meekly says, yeah. And I said,
and by the way, it'll cost you $50,000 for us to give you that insurance.
There are some careers where it's a little difficult to get insurance.
So as your career progressed, and you're just taking one step at a time, doing what you're passionate about that day, that next day, which is the greatest career advice. Better than just follow your heart to some end that's a million miles away, right?
Yeah. You can do both, though.
Yeah, you can. That's true.
You can do both.
Yeah, so long as you're doing what you're satisfied with now, then it doesn't fully matter if you hit that end, right?
You gotta have I think it's important to have goals, too.
Yeah.
But they can't be life or death goals.
Yeah.
If you don't achieve them, you got to be satisfied.
Yeah, amen.
Yeah.
So at what point did you start to realize, whoa, I might actually become an astronaut?
Well, it was.
I mean, was there at some point it was like that really lit your fire?
Yeah, no. I had a friend who I'd served with, and I'd kind of fought. He actually taught me how to fly one of the airplanes I flew in the Air Force, and then he went to test pilot school, and then I went to test pilot school, and he went to another base, and we both got assigned to the same base, and then he got accepted into the astronaut program, and although I hadn't really been interested in it, I was kind of curious about it.
Yeah.
And I called him up, and it was my last opportunity to apply, age-wise and career-wise, in the Air Force. And I called him up and I said, Brian, do you think I would, I'd enjoy this? And he says, I think you would. So I applied.
Wow.
and
wow.
And again, I was in a win-win position. I loved the Air Force. I loved what I was doing, and so if I didn't get picked, I was going to be content.
Okay.
And fortunately, and actually when I went down, I got selected to interview.
How old are you at this time?
Let's see, this would have been 1986, so I was 32.
Were you already a general?
No, I was a major.
You were a
in the
major,
Air Force.
okay.
Yeah, I think just newly selected major.
Wow.
And I, when I went to the interview, I was as much interviewing them. This sounds awful, but I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. And the interview process lasted a week. And when I came back to my base, now you have to wait to see if you get picked. I was so sold. I was I would have been so disappointed had I not been chosen.
Oh yeah.
Because spending that week there really solidified that this is something I would love to do.
Okay, so preparing for that first launch, what's going through your head the week, the day, the night before, as you're hanging out with your family and about to go into space the next day?
Well, you don't get to hang out with your family.
You don't.
And now, I think if you ask any astronaut,
you're quarantining, huh?
Yeah, they quarantine us in those days. I'm not sure what it is now. It's probably similar. A week before flight.
Okay.
And so you're in Houston. You're training, and a week before launch, you actually go into a quarantine facility in Houston because all our simulators were there, and they wanted us to be peaked up just before we went. And so those 7 days before the scheduled launch date, you had to say goodbye to your kids. Now your spouse could get a physical, and they would fly your whole family to Florida, which was great, and put them up in a hotel, and your spouse could come see you for a couple occasions before launch where they had holes in our calendar.
Wow.
And that was if they were healthy, they had to get a physical to do that. And same with my parents, they're able to, but I couldn't see my children because they're little bug carriers, right?
Oh yeah.
And for me personally, that was, and I think a lot of people would share this sentiment, saying goodbye to your kids the week before was hard.
Yeah.
And
I get a little nervous going across the country sometimes,
Yeah. So it just, you want to be there for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was, for me personally, that was my prayer. Literally, the night before launch, I would weep.
You would weep, wow.
Not cry. I would weep.
Wow.
In prayer. And my prayer was that I'd come back and continue to be a husband and a father to my children. Because I thought that's what I wanted to be.
So you knew you're risking everything.
We're all aware of that. But you didn't think about it. And for me, it was cathartic because after that, I was ready to go.
Wow.
I was ready to go. I never thought about it again.
That's profound.
It's kind of like you just kind of turn it all over to God there at that point. And I think, as I think I said in the video that we'll maybe show a little bit, you're going someplace that day.
I want to roll that video. And by the way, if you haven't seen The Search, you have to see The Search. And you got to share The Search with your friends. I know General Chilton because he was part of the Search program, episode 7, and in episode 7 shares about his first time leaving the planet. So let's we'll make sure to don't listen to the countdown. I know he gets triggered when he hears the words 10, 9.
Yeah, no, don't do that to me, Chris.
Let's see this.
You're excited, you're terrified, reviewing the checklists that are Velcroed to the wall. There's an astronaut comes in and checks, makes sure all your communications are right and everybody's comfortable, and then pats you on the head and says goodbye. And they close the hatch. You go, okay, it's just us now. The nearest human beings are 3 miles away. It's just us.
All systems are go for launch at this time.
And then you hear the final countdown from 10.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6.
When it's 6 seconds, the main engines on the space shuttle would ignite. We had simulators at NASA. The simulators didn't shake anything like the real vehicle. I was stunned at the vibration in the cockpit. In fact, my head was kind of banging off the inside of my helmet, going back and forth, and gauges that I could just normally read easily in the simulator were now kind of blurred because my head was moving around so much. Those 6 seconds felt like a minute. And I kept thinking, we are shaking so hard. If we don't lift off, something's going to come off this vehicle. Something's going to break. When those engines lit off, there's no doubt in your mind you're going someplace that day, and I'd hoped it was space. I'd been to confession. What's going to happen is going to happen. It's in the hands of the Lord. And then the man says 0. And you're immediately crushed back in your seat by the force of 3 times the acceleration of gravity. You thought it was bad sitting on the pad. Now it's really, really shaking. You get this incredible appreciation for the power of the vehicle. After 2 minutes, the solid rocket motors separate. Slowly, though, as the fuel burns down at the same thrust, the acceleration builds back up. I remember watching the velocity increase, and it's just amazing how fast you're accelerating.
Separation confirmed.
And then, boom. Main engine cut off. 8.5 minutes. And you come forward in the seat, you've survived launch.
Wow. Okay, so I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm the guy who watched Star Wars and Star Trek a zillion times growing up.
Yeah.
I'm starstruck looking at that and thinking, that guy did that.
That doesn't seem real. It really doesn't seem real.
No, yeah, what do you
Even
feel when you watch it?
Yeah, I just feel blessed. I feel so fortunate I got to do that. But, there's nothing really on Earth that, you have experiences in your life, and then maybe you see something else happens and you can relate back to it. There's nothing on Earth that really makes me think about that.
Wow.
There's no relationship. And so
that's like,
it's almost like it didn't happen. It's almost like it was a dream, but
wow.
but it did.
That's like heaven. I mean, when you think about certain concepts, there's concepts like eternity that are scary to people because there's no frame of reference to really relate with what the heck that means.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not sitting around for a long, long time. It's like, this is something utterly different. I want to hear the rest of the story that you told in the search, but before you get to that, what's it feel like the first time you go weightless? What's going through your head?
Well, 2 things. One, when the engines quit, you're strapped in so tight. I remember, on my first flight, and we had launched into darkness, and so I look out the window and I don't see anything, and I'm strapped in so tight I don't feel any difference. The only reason I know we're weightless is my checklist is floating next to me. That's a little different, but then finally my first thought was, so what's the big deal? But then you unstrap and you come out, and I think for a pilot, it's every pilot's dream is to actually fly unencumbered even by an airplane. Wow. So you're Superman all day when you're in that environment. You don't walk anywhere inside the space shuttle or the space station now. You float and push off and go across the room. It's really a neat feeling.
Yeah, is it kind
but different. I mean, kind of unnerving too.
Was it?
Yeah, I mean, you're used to sleeping, for example.
Did it feel more like play than work when you're floating all day?
You go back to do all the things your mom told you not to do. Don't play with your food. Oh, you got to play with your food in 0 gravity. And when we had time, usually in the evening before bedtime, we'd play. We'd play like kids.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So tell us the story that we showed in the search when you got up there and you're looking out the windshield.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was the only rookie on the flight.
Okay.
And so there was
That's comforting.
7 of, well, it was great because everyone else had flown before. They were experienced and just a great crew. And I'm the co-pilot, so I'm sitting in the right seat, and Dan Brandenstein's the commander in the left seat. And Dan's the chief of the astronaut office. I mean, he's the boss. And I was so privileged to fly with him. And we're going through when the engines quit, you have a series of checklists you're going through because you have to change this rocket ship into a spaceship now. So you're reconfiguring software and things. And people downstairs and behind us are getting out of their pressure suits. And so Dan and I are working together the checklist, and there comes a point in the checklist which says check for damage to the windscreen because you're flying up through the atmosphere. You could hit a bird. There could be debris from the rockets when they blow off the side.
So think of that.
So I look up, and it looks like on my windscreen, it looks like someone's taken a diamond and carved this perfect arc across the windscreen. Kind of like in the old car windows when they'd break, you get a crack across them, they wouldn't shatter. And I thought, oh my God, there's 3 panes of glass, but it looked like the outer pane was cracked. And so, our flight engineer, Rich Clifford's calling out the checklist, says check forward windows for damage. And I say, I think my thermal pane is cracked. I've never seen Dan look up at his window faster. And then he looks over at me and he says, put your checklist down, sit back and enjoy your first orbital sunrise. And what I was seeing that looked like a crack was the limb of the Earth being backlit by the sun. And so I mentioned we were on the dark side of the Earth. And then that perfect arc that looked white slowly turned red, white, and blue as the sun's rays came through the atmosphere, just a ribbon, a very thin ribbon. And then the sun bursts above the horizon. And unlike a sunrise on Earth, where it lights the sky, the background is space. And it's absolutely the blackest black you've ever seen.
Wow.
And in that blackest black is the brightest, whitest light you've ever seen, the sun. And it doesn't light up the space. I mean, it stays black, and it's blindingly white looking at you.
Wow.
And for me, as I reflected on it, it reminded me of, the Transfiguration. When they talk about how Christ...
Whiter than anything any fuller could make the clothing.
Right,
wow.
right. And then we were over the Indian Ocean, I think, or the South Pacific. As the sun began to light the Earth, this beautiful blue, of the ocean started to just kind of unfold towards you. And, that made me think of Mary, because I always associated the color blue with Mary.
Yeah.
I don't know if she ever wore blue in real life, but we always see her in statues. And, people ask me, did spaceflight change your beliefs or anything? I said, no, not at all. Just affirmed them.
Yeah.
Just affirmed them.
Wow, how beautiful.
Yeah, it was cool.
How did it change how you see the events of Earth? I mean, we get so locked into the daily in our own lives and then the news cycles.
Yeah.
Did it impact that?
Yeah, well, so there was and this wasn't an original idea. John Young, great man, he's since passed away, but he was an Apollo astronaut, went to the moon twice, walked on the moon, flew the very first space shuttle test mission. Just an amazing guy. He kind of gave me the idea, but it also originated being a fighter pilot. The old movies where the bad guys would attack out of the sun, right? Well, that's true today. You have to worry about that. And what you would do to look behind you into the sun is you would close one eye, extend your thumb, and put it over the sun. And if you did that, you could look very close to the disk and maybe see an airplane attacking you.
Wow.
So with that in mind, and John had talked about doing this on his flight, we're coming up over the South Pacific, heading toward Los Angeles, my hometown. And everybody wants to take a picture of their hometown from space, and I knew when this was going to happen. I had an alarm set, cameras were pre-positioned, and so the alarm went off. I went to the window, I got my camera out. Miracle of miracles, there was no smog in LA that day. It was gorgeous. And I banging away shooting all these pictures. And then I just put the camera down to take it all in and closed one eye and stuck my thumb out and covered up 6 million or 8 million people under my thumb.
Wow.
And it made me reflect on, God, we believe he cares about each and every one of us and how awesome that is. And it also, I was thinking, all those people under my thumb right now, every one of them's got some problem they're dealing with. And that's the way I always felt. And we all feel that way. Well, we all have rocks in our rucksack.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, I'm going to try to have a different perspective when I come back that, worry about the big things, but not the little things so much. Wow. And I'd like to think I'm better at it, but probably I'm not. Yeah. But at least I thought about it. And, It was an interesting moment, a perspective, a new perspective.
Oh, it's beautiful. Tell me about your Holy Communion in space. I think you're probably the first extraordinary minister of Holy Communion in outer space.
No, I'm not. Actually, I'm not. So I wasn't the original. A lot of people think I was because there was an article written about it. But no, others had done it. And I actually got the idea from a good friend and colleague, David Lowe. sadly, another former astronaut has passed away, way too young. And David and I were working together at the Cape, and he had already flown. And we're both Catholic, and he told me that he'd taken the Eucharist into space. I thought, oh man, that's great. On my first flight, I'm going to do that. And so David gave me the idea, and I was kind of a knucklehead though. I waited till the very last moment to go ring my pastor's doorbell. It was the day we were going into quarantine, so 7 days before launch.
Yeah.
And Father Tom at St. Bernadette's Parish, and I said, Father, I'd really like to take the Eucharist into space with me. He goes, oh, that's fantastic. Of course, everybody in that area knows about NASA and everything.
Yeah.
And then he says, and then he pauses for a minute and he says, you are a Eucharistic minister, aren't you? And I went, well, no, Father, I'm not.
We can make you one.
And he said, oh. And I said, well, Father, don't feel bad. This is my fault for coming to you at the last minute. And I'll come see you before my next flight. And then he looks up at me and he says, paperwork to follow. Let's go.
Wow.
And he gave me a pick, and I took the Eucharist with me. And on my first flight, Pierre Thuet was a crewmate, and he was also Catholic, and we shared the Eucharist. Had a particularly difficult time in the flight where we were having troubles, not life-threatening troubles, but mission success troubles. And it was weighing heavily on Pierre. It was weighing heavily on all of us. But Pierre, he'd kind of been the point man on this particular part of the mission, and I remembered looking at him, and he knew I'd brought the Eucharist with me. And I said, maybe this would be a good time to share the Eucharist. And he said, I think so. And,
praise God.
It worked out.
The Lord's there. I
out.
can't imagine the experience of being that close to God.
It was, the second flight was even, I thought, they were all special. I brought the Lord with me on all three flights. But the second flight was really special. There was three of us that were, my commander, I was the co-pilot, my commander, Sid Gutierrez, and Tom Jones was on the flight. And we were on different shifts. It was a 24-hour mission. So Sid and I were on the same shift, but Tom was on a different shift. And we'd overlap at handover time. We were 12 hours on, 12 hours off.
Wow.
And it just so happens we caught ourselves on the flight deck together during the handover. It was just Tom, who was floating between Sid and I, and we were sitting in our respective seats. And this was Easter time that we were on this flight. And I said, man, this would be a good time to receive
the Lord.
Receive the Eucharist and the Lord. And yeah, okay. Well, again, we're on the dark side of the earth. And it's very quiet. And I distribute the Eucharist, and we say a prayer. And then I close my eyes, and I put the Eucharist on my tongue. And at that instant, this incredible heat came over across my face.
Wow.
And if you look at a really bright light, you can see the inside of your eyelids.
Yeah.
That happens. And I immediately opened my eyes, and what had happened is we had flown into sunrise again.
Oh,
and that was the
chills.
sun. And it happened at the exact instant I put the Eucharist on my tongue.
Oh, praise God.
And Sid and I and Tom, we all looked at each other, and all three of us started to tear up. It was just so emotional.
Incredible.
And, and crying in space is not particularly recommended because
the tears just
stay on your eye. They don't run down your cheek. So it's kind of like you're underwater. But that was really special.
It's extraordinary.
And then I had a chance to share the Eucharist with Ron Sega on my last flight, another Catholic man. So.
Well, praise God. Thank you for sharing all this. We're going to do this again, and I can't wait to ask you a whole lot more.
Yeah.
I had learned of a Russian cosmonaut who got into space, and he was an atheist. He said, I looked around, there was no God anywhere.
Yeah.
I often think that would be like Frodo getting to the top of Mount Doom and saying, there's no J.R.R. Tolkien.
Yeah.
Right? Right? God is not this little, like Zeus flying around space.
Right.
Space is in him. Mm-hmm. And so thanks for sharing how you found the Lord there and brought him there too.
Yeah, it was special.
Yeah, thank you so much. What an honor to talk to you.
Chris, great to be with you today.
Praise God. Guys, we'll see you next time.